Hello, anybody who's watching this. Welcome to my reaction to Unbiased History Rome 15, Diocletian Tetrarchy. I'm not sure what Tetrarchy means. Nah, even trying to translate it. Nah. Um, by Devakti, of course. And before we begin, if you have a question, like if I have I feel like somebody has, at least one person, a silent question because nobody asked it in the comments, but why does it take long between the Vakti videos? It's not like it's too difficult to record. Like half an hour to 40 minutes is not that big of a difference at this point. It's just they don't pay at all. I just get a couple hundred views. I don't want to sound, I definitely don't want to sound ungrateful, but no, I enjoy that people like these videos and stuff like that. But unlike most of the other ones I do, these getting copyrighted. I put the headphones in. For the openings he does, and I know which one this time it's gonna be. I've heard a second of it, so I know. Uh, yeah, they just get copyrighted, and that's about it. And because of that, I don't make anything off them, so it's less. Not forces. What's the word would be better here? I guess I can use forces, and it forced me to look for something else, something that I will get a little bit paid for. It's never a lot. Like I'm just fighting for scraps here because of the size of the channel, but either way, it's been 2 minutes while I was blabbering. Alright, anyway, if you want to help out, there's a donation link in the description below, and you can also just like, comment, subscribe, anything helps. And let's begin. Oh yeah. It sounds like that for now. Okay, Severian. The medium. Oh, he was a farmer actually. That's a million. Galerius. Probus, alright. Constantinius. Tetrarchy. Tetra means 5, if I'm not wrong.
The restorer of the world was betrayed.
Oh
After
yeah.
saving the empire from decades of civil war and barbarian invasions, Aurelian's death was mourned by all. When the
It
catastrophe
was
was relayed to
Aurelian
the
last
legions,
video.
they were
God damn
consumed
it.
with the most anguished sorrow
I
and
forgot.
direst anger. All of Aurelian's
I'll make it a
assassins
bit
were
more
then
loud.
rounded up and subjected to the worst tortures known to man. They then sent word to Rome, expressing that none of the officers felt worthy enough to follow on Aurelian's steps. Depression and rage the only thing in their minds. The Senate, in turn, was horrified at the prospect of having to elect the next emperor, given who he would have to.
Okay. I tried to remember the actual name. Fuck Praetarians. Praetarians? I don't know at this
Live up
point.
to. So they begged the legions to choose
I
one
had
for
to
them,
say it.
which they
Just
refused.
remember.
They begged again, were refused again, and this back and forth continued for months. And as it did, during
Months
the
without an
interregnum,
emperor.
Aurelian's wife, Oppia Severina, ruled Rome, the first and only empress of the
hello.
whole Roman Empire.
What are you
Did I
doing
say
on the
that she
roof?
had a daughter of Aurelian? Because she did. Not that it will be relevant, I assure you. So what can we say about our little Augusta over here? Well, for starters, she wasn't a Severan. Forget the last name. Instead, she was related to Trajan's line, as the first name implies. She was a Romano-Dacian survivor too, so if a woman ever deserved to rule Rome, Oppia's as good as it gets. And what did Oppia do with all of her power? Absolutely fuck all, refusing to take advantage of her husband's death and just printing coins for fun while waiting for a successor to be chosen. So after 8 months of back and forth, the Senate relented and decided to pull a Nerva and elect a highly capable old geezer as emperor, Marcus Tacitus, a full-blooded descendant of the good historian. Taken by surprise with the elevation, Tacitus gave a fine speech, granting the senators lots of power to appease their egos. Quite fitting, as he would be the last emperor they ever elected into power. Oppia and her daughter then voluntarily abdicated and vanished from the history books. Tacitus then traveled to Moesia to meet the legions, saw that the legionaries
really?
were
This is
still
gone.
torturing Aurelian's assassins, and decided to just ease tensions and order their executions. Meanwhile, word of Aurelian's death reached the germs, who used this chance to remind everyone that the crisis of the 3rd century was still ongoing. Tacitus then sent his half-brother and Praetorian
It is still the
prefect,
3rd century.
Florianus, to go clean up the Danube from 99% of the germs. And to help him rule, Tacitus appointed the legate Probus as governor of the eastern provinces. For after a lifetime of war in the service of Aurelian, including retaking Egypt from Zenobia, Probus had become among the best generals of the time. While touring the east, Tacitus heard that the breach of the Limes Germanicus allowed the Germans to invade Gaul again. Alemanni, Franks, Goths, Vandals, Burgundians, every viral species. But before he could respond, he caught a very weird illness. It basically drove him mad, making him name all 12 months of the year in his honor, and then dying right after. Deja vu. And as the emperor's half-brother, and having the most legions at hand, Florianus usurped power and acclaimed himself emperor.
Not the fucking time.
But he didn't really have the legions. In the heart,
he
named himself emperor. To the detriment
okay, it's on my PC. It's a video
right
right
now.
now.
Have the legions. In
Scared
the hearts
me.
of every veteran, only those among Aurelian's officer corps deserved to wear the purple. And among those, Probus currently held the highest rank, so it was him they recognized as Augustus. Florianus didn't relent though, and marched east to face Probus, which proves to be his undoing. Probus' reputation was that of a veteran that won victories in every corner of the empire, and when he faced him in Cilicia, he used his experience to lock Florianus' bigger army at the hot climate of the Sicilian gates. With the legions being tortured by the harsh climate, they just killed the usurper Florianus and joined up with Probus, like they wanted to.
Purple
After
armor,
being
you can fuck
recognized
off.
by the Senate, Probus defended Moesia against another Gothic invasion, crushing them so hard that they begged for a peace treaty. He then marched to Gaul and began brutally slaughtering all Germanic invaders. As he fought, he pushed them back to the Rhine, recovering the lost forts of the border and killing as many barbarians as possible. By the end of the campaign, he spared the world of 400,000 germs and was acclaimed both Germanicus and Gothicus Maximus. Sadly, the border regions of the Rhine had been severely depopulated by the constant barbarian onslaught. So Probus figured on settling some Germans as civilians in the most affected areas, hoping they would integrate with the local populace. Meanwhile, Diocles was serving in Gaul as well, alongside his fellow officer, Galerius, and seeing him rising through the ranks, he was approached by a soothsayer that proclaimed Diocles would attain great power by slaying a boar. And prophecies never lie, they are just severed. As a diligent soldier, Probus allowed no idleness among his troops. If there were no barbarians to kill, then there were swamps to drain and farms to tend to. He extended that philosophy to the Praetorian Guard, and to keep their treacherous tendencies in check, he appointed a man he highly trusted, Carus, as his Praetorian prefect. Probus then rode on, continuing to defend against barbarians from Rhaetia to the Nile, suppressing revolts from Hispania to Britannia, and ordering the ruins of the empire to be slowly rebuilt. And after celebrating a triumph, he sought to revive Aurelian's campaign against Rome's enemies, starting, as he did, against the Sassanids. And with the number of Rome's enemies already decreasing a lot, Probus expressed joy that perhaps one day Rome won't even need soldiers anymore, an expression the Praetorians heard loud and clear. Already pissed at being forced to perform civic duty for once, and with the prospect of a peaceful future making their jobs obsolete, the Praetorian Guard then had Probus murdered.
For
even though he
fuck's sake!
The campaign they wanted. Soon. Very soon. They then acclaimed their prefect Carus as their emperor, yet another unwilling Augustus to add to the pile. And after having all of Probus' assassins executed and being too old to rule effectively, Carus elevated both of his sons,
destroy the fucking Praetorian Guard. Just get rid of them. Jesus.
Carinus and Numerian as Caesars, despite the weakness of the latter and debauchery of the former. In his reign, he would appoint Diocles as his cavalry commander, and consul to boot, serving together with a competent soldier, Maximian, who was also a really dumb politician, later sending Constantius to govern Dalmatia, the homeland of Diocles. Picking up where Probus left off, Carus marched east with Numerian to face off the Sassanids, while leaving the west at the hands of Carinus. And as he cleaned up frays from some barbarian invaders in the Sassanid Empire, Shapur's banishment made some weaker demons take his place, and when Carus invaded, he was met with little resistance, allowing him to take all of Mesopotamia, sack Ctesiphon, and cross the Tigris River. While in Rome, Carinus proved again that some apples can fall really fucking far from the tree. The minute he became emperor, he started punishing everyone he'd envied or didn't like, completely trashed the imperial palace, and married and divorced 9
The
different
true
women,
incel.
none of them his actual wife. Once Carus heard of his son's depravities, he declared his intent to substitute him with one of his best legates, Constantius Chlorus, yet another one of Aurelian's veterans. Having personally helped him crush the Palmyrene Empire, Constantius was well known for both his talent and loyalty. Acclaimed as Persicus Maximus, Carus prepared to venture even further than even Trajan did, and it was then that he was struck by lightning and died.
Fucking
For
Jupiter.
a competent emperor to incur divine wrath confused a lot of people, but not Commander Diocles, who assured this must have been part of some grander divine plan. Convinced this was a sign to return home, Diocles convinced Numerian, guarded by his Praetorian prefect, to order them back to the empire.
No.
As they marched west, Aper told the legionaries the
No.
emperor had suffered from an eye disease and had to be concealed from the light. So they kept on going, with Aper relaying ever more absurd orders in the emperor's name, while a foul stench arose,
How long has
all
he
making
been
Diocles
dead?
ever more suspicious. Breaking in to check on Numerian, he found the emperor's corpse rotting in a pool of his own blood. Betrayed by the Praetorian Guard, who could have guessed?
Yeah, what a
Numerian's
fucking
generals then
surprise!
Aper
God
seized,
damn it.
meeting together in Nicomedia to discuss what to do next. And after realizing Carinus was now the sole emperor, the generals agreed that the greatest among them, Diocles, should rise to confront him. The generals and legions then gathered on a hill
Diocles sounds
outside
familiar.
Nicomedia and proclaimed Diocles as Augustus.
Maybe
He
I've heard of
accepted,
his reign.
drawing his sword towards the sun, renaming himself as Gaius Aurelius Valerius Diocletianus, and executing Aper for all to see. Aper, by the way, is Latin for boar. Told ya. Seeking to free the empire from the tyranny of Carinus, Diocletian marched west, and Carinus in turn marched east. Just then another usurper rose up in Pannonia, and man, what's with that fucking place and traitors? Well, anyway. Before Carinus' overwhelming numbers faced off with Diocletian in Illyria,
Good example, I
Constantius
guess,
joined up with his brother
for
in
locals.
arms, helping him survive the initial battles. Carinus, however, enjoyed the opposite situation, and legion after legion refused to fight for him, defecting to Diocletian's banner. And as he raged on, he was suddenly backstabbed by his Praetorian prefect, one of the many officers he had cucked. Emerging victorious,
I'm not even gonna be happy that Praetorians kill a shitty emperor. I'm not giving them credit anymore
as
at
the
all.
sole ruler
Fuck
of the empire, and then
off.
immediately crushing the last barbarian horde still raiding the empire, Diocletian concluded Aurelian's legacy,
Oh, fuck.
officially putting an end to the crisis of the 3rd century. That didn't mean
Okay.
peace was assured, far from it. In fact, Diocletian's
After the last video, I thought crisis of the 1st century ended with Aurelius. But
obsession throughout
I guess
his
this
reign
is
will
now
be to
the
ensure
official end
nothing
of
like the
that.
crisis ever happened again. The decades of torment had shaped Diocletian into a brilliant, yet cynical mind, and after seeing how irrelevant and unhelpful the Senate was during it all, he grew to despise it even more than Domitian, ignoring it completely. The age of Augustus's principate has ended. No longer would power be derived from the corrupted institutions of the Republic. Rome needed something more. Thus, the emperor's authority now derived from nothing else than divine right. The age of the dominant had dawned, with Diocletian not as your princeps, your first citizen, but as Dominus, your lord and master. And to prevent the past from repeating itself, Diocletian concluded a single emperor could hardly rule effectively if the empire faced multiple threats at the same time. Diocletian knew only truly great men could rule over the whole Roman Empire. So to build a system where great men weren't needed, he chose to elevate his friend Maximian as Caesar, assuming the title of Jovius, another name for Jupiter, and Maximian taking the title of Herculius, the son of Jupiter. With 2 emperors to help each other, and they're all
Hey, what was
taking the
that?
title of Herculius, the
The Roman hero, son of Jupiter. Herculius, not... How do I say it? Hercules? Hercules, that's the one. Not Hercules, the son of Zeus, the Greek hero. That's completely different.
son of Jupiter. With 2 emperors to help each other, and their
I just
authority
like how
now emanating from divine
similar they are.
right, Diocletian severely discouraged future usurpers from rising up as they used to. And with his rule consolidating, Diocletian's attention shifted to the Praetorian Guard.
Yes.
Oh, the Praetorian Guard.
Come on.
He detested them with the fury of 1,000 souls, but instead of
Yes.
killing them all, Diocletian felt more appropriate to humiliate them instead. All Praetorians were then kicked out of the imperial palace, cut down in both number and wealth, and sent to guard an irrelevant shithole of a fort in Rome, given no task but to seethe at how irrelevant they now were.
Take their fucking armor off. Make him normal. Because I'm afraid they're gonna come back. That's how it usually goes when you send somebody away instead of killing them in like movies, shows, anime, and stuff. Whatever.
were. Indeed, their treachery now only reached as far as the Milvian Bridge did, right beside the entrance to Rome. And for those of you who have kept this place in mind, keep keeping it. The discouragement, however, didn't include.
What?
And for those of you who have kept this place in mind, keep keeping it. The
Oh, okay.
discouragement, however,
I
didn't
didn't.
include barbarians, forcing him to go crush some Sarmatians, and later sending Maximian to Milan, where he was to rule the west and hunt down some bandits raiding central.
That's the name of Milan in the old days. Mediolanum. Mediolanum. Should say it slower.
Regarding the Sassanids, Diocletian had the weak demon king bow to his whim, making him return Armenia and give up more of Mesopotamia. And as he did, the Germans in the Rhine started naval expeditions of their own, ransacking the Gallic coast, all while the Alemanni and Burgundians redestroyed the Limes Germanicus. So to deal with the pirates, Maximian sent his best naval officer, Carausius, while he fought the Germans on the land. Unfortunately,
No Chads on
Carausius
screen,
cared
that's
for nothing but
worrisome.
gold. Not only taking the wealth the Franks stole for himself, but outright letting the Germans pass by and sack entire towns, just so he could intercept them and take the raided wealth for himself. Horrified by this news, Maximian demanded Carausius should come
I'll give him that. He's a strategist when it comes to bullshittery, but
back to him and answer
still
for
an
his
asshole.
crimes, which of course he refused, stealing the imperial fleet for himself, using the wealth to bribe the Britons to support him, allying with the Franks, helping them take over the Gallic coast and proclaiming himself Augustus of his new Britannic Empire. A really dumb politician indeed. And no
Is that
one
the
was
start
more
of
pissed
Britain?
about this than
Not yet.
Diocletian. The legitimacy of the Diarchy at stake,
Britain being
Diocletian
separate
refused Carausius' demands to
from
be legitimized, elevating Maximian as an Augustus to save his reputation, then coordinating with him to launch a counter-invasion, brutally ravaging Carausius' German allies. Having helped him do so, Diocletian returned east again, got flanked by rude Sarmatians again, and crushed them again. Maximian then built his own fleet, completely botched the invasion and then blamed everything on the weather. Hearing the news, Diocletian sighed and marched west again, meeting with his co-emperor in Mediolanum, throwing a party to save Maximian's reputation and making sure to humiliate the Senate some more. But the Diarchy wasn't working as it should. If one of the emperors needed help from the other, it left their part of the empire leaderless. And so, Diocletian doubled down on his new system, transforming the Diarchy into the Tetrarchy, with the theme of 4 emperors,
Tetrarchy is 4.
1 empire. And he just had the right man in mind, his 2 veteran friends,
Peta is 5?
Constantius and Galerius. The latter was then elevated as Caesar of the East by Diocletian, arranged to marry his daughter, and the former as Caesar of the West by Maximian.
Actually, wait, let me go back for a sec. So, okay, like Britain and France are in the same part, in a big part, including like where the Spain and Portugal is, the Italy, and some of the Africa. Then that part with the Greece is, I believe, and other countries that I know less about. And then there's that. Okay.
Who had already divorced his wife and married Maximian's daughter. So here's Diocletian's Tetrarchy, 1 empire.
Why did I return like a second? Just watch for a little bit. Damn it.
Ruled by 2 senior Augusti, with 2 junior Caesars to serve as heirs and rule the shit provinces. Each had their own capital.
That is a great idea, and I was thinking about it.
Did whatever Diocletian told them.
I want to say in this video, actually, in the beginning, that if you divide it like by regions, not like this, I didn't think of like entirely this system, just divide it by regions, and then have some people rule those parts. But I thought that it still might mean that there won't be enough men, so that wouldn't work. But maybe it will.
And once the Augusti died, the Caesars would take over their place, and 2 new Caesars would be chosen. Do notice
There's
the
no
senators
Praetarians
completely powerless over here, where they belong.
Good.
Since they were all one big family now, Diocletian hosted both of Constantius' and Maximian's sons in his court, among them an ambitious little cunt, Maxentius. He then sent Galerius to go crush a revolt in the Nile, and then
I forgot that before Praetorians were killing emperors. There were family members killing emperors for power.
Constantius to go put down
Shit,
Carausius'
that'll never
revolt.
change, but
Being granted the
those
hardest task in
Praetorians are
the
fucked
empire and seeing the
for
port
now,
of Bononia was the main base of
or
Carausius'
forever,
fleet,
hopefully.
Constantius first cleared the Gallic coast of the Franks, then laid siege to Bononia, making his legions build a dam over the port, denying it any relief and forcing them to surrender. With his Brittonic empire now crumbling, Carausius was then murdered by his Praetorian prefect, Alactus. Nah, just kidding, he was his finance minister of all people, but who cares. Constantius then built a fleet, invaded, and had Alactus killed as well. With their
Wait, so
partners
he
in crime.
What? I didn't get what you were kidding about. That he was Praetorian. Hope I think. Or like who he was, his position itself.
Now dead, the Franks were let off the leash and started slaughtering all innocent civilians around them. As they marched south to sack Londinium, Constantius halted them, completely exterminating every last Frank, and when he turned to start what was gonna be a brutal siege for Londinium, the local Brits received him as their hero, acclaiming him as the restorer of eternal light, Reditor Lucis Aeterna.
Okay.
The Reditor Constantius then returned to Trier in the Rhine. While his
Okay, I will come back again.
The Reditor
I don't know why he
Constantius then
left,
returned
but
to Trier in the Rhine.
I guess
While his
foreshadowing for
Augustus
something.
Maximian was fighting Frankish pirates that had gotten all the way to Numidia.
How the fuck did you do
North
that?
Africa. Imagine that. And after dealing with some Berber barbarians in the mountains, we get to what most defined Diocletian's reign. Reforms, reforms, and a fuckload of reforms. Starting off, not only did Diocletian more than double the number of imperial provinces, but his
Okay.
new system of dioceses would be stolen by the Christians of all people. The governor of each diocese
Okay.
not only now ruled over less resources, but the soldiers in his lands were now led by another dude, the Dux. In fact,
Dux.
Diocletian made it so bureaucratic and military careers were permanently distinguished from each other. And speaking of the legions, Diocletian also got rid of the old cohort system as a whole, basing much of his thinking from what emperors like Gallienus had to endure. The barbarian invasions were now too big for 5,000-man strong legions sparsely placed to deal with. So he did two things. One, he hugely increased the size of the army from 390,000 men to 580,000 men, most
Okay.
of them stationed in the east. The navy got a bump as well. And two, the Roman army now displayed two main units, the Limitani Ripenses, plebs that guarded the frontiers part-time, and the new legion, the Comitatenses, making up nimbler units of
Male.
1,000 men each and supported with a lot of cavalry. The legions were now far more mobile and practical, so much so Diocletian built some 20 new legions, and inspired by Aurelian's walls, every major city across the empire began building walls of their own. In this new system,
Okay.
with the Limitani defending the borders, small invaders were easily repelled, and large invasions were both spotted and relayed to other troops. Once the big barbarian hordes broke through, they would be unable to break through the nearest city walls, lacking siege weapons and all, getting harassed by local forces until the nearest emperor had time to muster the legions and kick the barbarians back to their mud huts. Defense in
Nice.
death, we now call it. A common strategy for large empires. And this was all terribly expensive as well. So to collect the taxes
Yeah,
to
that
pay
makes
for it
sense.
all,
Everything about
Diocletian
money.
sent his agents to perform the first empire-wide census in history,
Godforsaken
cataloging
world.
every last property, land, pleb, and patrician there was, figuring out how much each citizen could provide. Sadly, the denarii by that point was utterly worthless, so Diocletian issued new coins, among them a new gold coin, the solidus, the gold coin, the one everyone and their peasant mother would copy for millennia. It would take a while
Okay.
until the monetary reforms took effect, so Diocletian had his new army of bureaucrats to come up with an equivalence chart of items to temporarily replace currency. When the tax collectors came, the plebs were allowed to pay with anything, food, goods, their mother, whatever they had. And part
Okay.
and parcel of Diocletian's enlightened autocracy,
I
he
think that's
standardized
fair.
Rome's taxation system on all provinces, meaning that Italy, long exempt from taxes, now paid as much as Illyrian provincials and the like did. Only Rome remained safe from this, as despite of the Senate, Diocletian still respected the Eternal City. But as you
Okay.
likely gathered, he didn't care for plebs at all. In fact, in order to further stabilize the empire, Diocletian transformed the plebs into proto-peasants, serfs, if you will. They were now tied to their land, and get this, permanently chained to hereditary professions. The plebs
How long did Russia had serfdom? I found that word a couple days ago. It's weird to see it here all of a sudden. But serfdom in Russia was a big, big thing. And it's 1886, I want to say. It took a while to get rid of.
Were allowed to inherit their father's profession and never be allowed to quit. A reform done so that the empire would
That's a
never
weird
run short of crucial
way to look.
professions. While these reforms tackled
See a
pretty much
dog?
all problems inherent of the 3rd century, inflation still ran rampant, and man, did that ever trigger Diocletian. Such inflation forced his own soldiers to blow their entire savings just to live another day, and every time he was reminded of this injustice, it enraged him deeply. And who did he blame? None other than the merchants. None of them Jewish though. Hadrian really didn't mess around. And so to fight this injustice, Diocletian wrote a fucking huge book, listing every single item that could be sold in the empire and establishing a maximum price it could be sold for. But no one paid heed to it, even if the death penalty was at stake. Alas,
That actually exists in Russia, partially. But the taxes. Every region has a minimal and maximum amount of taxes they can ask for people to pay. And in my region, it's all maxed out. Not every region has them maxed out. So people sometimes, like they buy a car and then move to a neighboring region to register it because the taxes there are less. So they'll register that and then use it here anyway because they live here. And they just pay less taxes because they registered it in a different region.
the world just wasn't ready for the full force of Diocletian's reforming genius. And with, say, most of his reforms an astounding success, Diocletian then went to fight against some other Sarmatian invasion. Again, this time annihilating them so hard they pretty much stopped being an issue, calling himself Sarmaticus Maximus and building a series of forts to strengthen the Danube, with 15 legions worth of Limitani to guard it, which was much easier now without the Dacians sticking out into the Carpathian Mountains. Meanwhile, Galerius was finishing crushing some wee wizards down the Nile, then went to Syria to face the renewed Sassanid threat, none other than Shapur's own son, Narse. Yes, the demon had laid eggs before his banishment, ensuring that his demonic line would continue tormenting the world. And after usurping power from the weaker demons, Narses sought to restore his father's reign of terror, invading Armenia and then the Empire, and say it with me, slaughtering everyone on his path. Galerius then went to stop him at Carrhae, but was completely overwhelmed by his endless hordes of evil. Barely managing to return safely from the battle, he was met by one furious Diocletian. For having disgraced Rome, Diocletian made his junior Caesar march a mile on foot throughout the desert sun. And having punished him so, he granted him some reinforcements to invade through Armenia this time, cucking Narses' cavalry in the mountains and beating him back. The Sassanids then camped away to recover, only to be caught by surprise by Galerius, forcing the demon to flee the fucking word for it. Leading his soldiers, wife, and harem of chaos to be captured alive by Galerius. The Romans then marched south and sacked Ctesiphon for, what, the 6th time now? I lost count. Diocletian and Galerius then got Narse to agree meeting up and discuss terms of peace. And
not Caesars, I'm thinking of crab thing. What is it called? Whatever.
The Sassanids started out by demanding the Romans to be magnanimous in victory, which just made Diocletian explode in anger. It was only after beating all of Narses' minions to death with Valerian's skeleton that he was able to get his point across. The emperors then humiliated the Sassanids, retaking Armenia, expanding on Mesopotamia, and setting the Sassanid borders under permanent Roman occupation, ensuring peace for the next 30 years. And to thank for their efforts, Egypt threw a big revolt.
I'll take it.
Simple, really. With Diocletian now cracking hard on the ancient Egyptian tradition of tax evasion, they revolted under a dude whose name I won't even bother you with. After pacifying the countryside, Diocletian personally sieged Alexandria for 9 gruesome months. After finally breaching in, Diocletian vowed to go full Caracalla on Alexandria until the blood reached his horse's knees, which was when his horse lay down on the pool of blood. As a pious man, Diocletian took the hint, and was merciful instead, ending with the citizens of Alexandria erecting a statue in Diocletian's horse's honor. The two emperors then went to Antioch to attend a spiritual sacrifice, but as the priests carved into the animal's entrails to read the god's words, they couldn't find anything. And when they were questioned what the problem was, he said that the Christians were fucking with his sacrifice. And yeah, they were. furious at their impiety, and as Diocletian revived Decius' edict against Christians, he saw yet another foul cult arise, Manichaeism. Seeing it for the demonic Persian chaos cult it was, Diocletian ordered all Manichaeists to be persecuted, destroying their temples, burning their religious texts, and executing every last one of them. And you know what?
Yikes.
It worked. Manichaeism never grew too big and it was eventually eradicated from the empire, which gave both emperors some ideas. To decide what they should do, both emperors went to visit the Oracle of Apollo, one of the purest aspects of Sol Invictus, but he was unable to help them, claiming that the impiety of the world had blinded him. For both emperors, enough was enough. For centuries the Christians shunned Rome's gods, defied its emperors, and set fire to everything else. They deserved nothing less than a great persecution. 1, 2, 3, and go. Diocletian then wrote his edicts. By imperial decree, all churches, temples, texts, wealth, and rights were destroyed across the empire. But the Christians didn't comply, and as punishment, the Christians were fined, demoted, deposed, jailed, and exiled in the army and state. Now bitchier than ever, true to Christ-cook tradition, they complained, lied, disobeyed, profaned, revolted, and hid no matter the cost. Despite Diocletian's mercy, the Christians tore the edicts from the streets and set fire to the imperial palace. Twice. The Christians had broken the law, ancient Roman virtues, and by then, Diocletian's patience. All lawbreakers were executed, and imposed orders to kill, jail, flog, nail, cleave, flay, and torture every last Christian that disobeyed. Salt was rubbed in their wounds, forced to kneel to Rome's deities, and gouged, impaled, threatened, depraved, and injured in every way. Their leadership was devastated, and Diocletian made it law to kill, jail, flog, nail, cleave, hang, flay, torture, gouge, impale, threaten, deprave, bruise, stab, injure, behead, mutilate, destroy, whip, tear, strike, cut, savage, wound, exile, sack, menace, and burn every single lawbreaking Christian.
Voice. I mean, I don't condone it, but the way they did the things.
Churches destroyed. But in the end, it was too little, too late. The Christians continued proliferating, disobeying edicts, bribing off authorities, and overall negating all of the persecution's achievements. Diocletian and Galerius had killed many Christians, but at the end of the day, that's all they accomplished. Constantius had predicted the persecution's failure, so he never invested too heavily on it. Maximian did though, but he was nevertheless unsuccessful as well. To calm down, Maximian celebrated their 20 years of co-rule by bringing Diocletian for his first ever official visit to the Eternal City. And in his honor, Maximian ordered built and Diocletian finished building the Baths of Diocletian, yet another massive bathing complex. It fit well with the massive palace he built back in Dalmatia too, more on that later. But try as he might to chill, Diocletian couldn't stop noticing how Rome had degenerated from the days of old. When he looked at the streets, all he saw were them filled with dirty plebs, adulterous whores, spreading Christ-cookery, and corrupt praetorians just looking for someone regal to stab. Enraged, Diocletian cut his visit short, refusing to attend his 9th consulship ceremony, already knowing the state the Senate would be in. He then returned east, helping Galerius to defend against a small Dacian invasion. But as he assisted him, Diocletian developed a crippling illness. He then returned to Nicomedia, opening a circus built in his honor, and then secluding himself in his palace, growing ever weaker. When everyone grew to assume he had died, Diocletian reappeared, an unrecognizable shadow of his former self. Diocletian then gathered his men on the very same hill he was in 2 decades ago, to proclaim his resignation, the first emperor to do so. Having become too weak to rule, he vowed to...
And you know why? Because Praetorians got fucked.
...step out so that the younger Caesars could take over, convincing Maximian to do the same, though he really didn't want to. Diocletian then elevated Galerius to the position of Augustus, as did Maximian to Constantius, and to fill up the 2 vacant Caesar slots, Maximinus and Constantius' sons were ignored. Maxentius was one of those little shits that could never be trusted with power, but it was Constantius' son that Diocletian was most concerned with. It was then left to Galerius to pick to the next Caesars, choosing an old military friend of his, Valerius Severus.
That's a good system. That's a very good system, not to give power by blood, but to somebody who's deserving in the eyes of the actual emperor.
Non-Severan, and also his own nephew, Dia. The Tetrarchy now, formally, looked like this, but really was more like this right now. Here's the new Caesars not quite yet in power, there's Maximian and Maxentius left out, and here is Diocletian, spending his retirement in his Dalmatian homeland, cultivating the noblest of all vegetables, cabbages. And in the west, Constantius ruled on, crushing even more germs on the Rhine and humiliating the Picts beyond the wall, setting a base in Eboracum, modern York, and getting acclaimed as
Oh,
Britannicus Maximus. But Constantius's time was also at an end. Near
that
his
was
death,
fast.
he called upon his soldiers to gather around him and listen to his last wishes. And the words that Constantius then uttered would change Rome and the world forever.
Leave Rome. Out in Byzantium. Oh, he named his successor. Oh shit. Pretty close. Ah, the cocktease! I could watch the next one immediately though. Or I could go eat food, something I haven't done in about 16 hours. Pause the video. His name is I'm sorry. So he's at least sorry for everything he does. I guess there's a lot of time between the videos. Since 2020. Even me releasing videos quite apart from each other. Even with that system, I'm catching up to his content, and maybe at some point in the future, I will be doing reaction to his videos as soon as they come out. Because as far as I know, Byzantium hasn't ended yet. His videos on Byzantium, I mean. Byzantium did end. The Empire, at least. Whatever. You know what I meant? Great. When people said that the quality of videos increases the more time goes on, it's so blatant to show. I still have, even without watching the very first one, I have memories of me being annoyed how, like, it was fast paced and the content of it was a lot around magic and stuff. So it wasn't that interesting for me from content perspective, and the editing as it in itself was made in a way that it's hard to understand. But this is like the perfect way for his content to grow. Just not to grow, to be told. That's who that was. Constantine. So I wonder if that name is used still. It is used in Russia. Well, there are a lot of Constantines running around. Anyway, thank you, anybody who watched this. I appreciate it a lot, and I hope to see you next time. Goodbye. Have a great life, because one of us missed it.